We are a part of the Mental Health News Radio Network.
You've tuned in to Rescue the Rescuer, the show that focuses on helping first responders who may be experiencing challenges such as addiction, PTSD, relationship failure, and more. We use stories of struggle and recovery to highlight successful survival strategies for those in this powerfully stressful field of work. And now, here's your host, Steven Kavalkovich.
Hey everyone, this is Steven. Thanks for joining me on the show. I'm a former paramedic in long-term recovery from addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder. I've created this podcast to help others who may be experiencing a story similar to mine find a path beyond their problems and towards a life that they deserve. Before we get started with today's episode, let's hear this short message from one of my supporters. Putting together this show has been amazing, but I couldn't have done it without the help of my producer. James Healy and the wonderful team over at McLean Media has been instrumental in helping me get the show off the ground and my message of healing to you. If you are like me and want to start your own podcast or write a book, but have no idea where to begin and are completely overwhelmed, you are in good hands. Give James a call today or set up a free discovery session and learn how you can quickly and easily get your powerful and important message out to those who need it. Head on over to recoveryinnovators.com for all the details. All right, thanks again for joining me, and let's get started with today's show. So today I have a special treat for you guys. I've got a gentleman who I recently met through some mutual contacts who's out in Washington State up in the Pacific Northwest, which is somewhere I definitely want to check out someday because I hear it's really beautiful up there. And he's going to share his story about where he came from and also about what he's doing to support people, first responders, firefighters, EMTs, and those who who are you guys, the audience here. He's doing something pretty unique that I think would be a great resource to maybe reach out to him as he you get to know him and hear what he came up with as he battled his own situation. So I'm here with Leckey Harrison, who's a retired volunteer firefighter EMT, a former carpenter, and manufacturing inventory and production manager. After his perfect storm call, which he's going to talk about, he went on to co-manage the nonprofit Whidbey CareNet and co-found Raise Your Resilience LLC. He lives in an intentional community and is an advanced student in Krav Maga self-defense. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Leckey.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming on this morning. I know it's a little bit earlier out there. I think it's about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning out where you're at.
Yeah, about 20 to 9. We're going to have apparently showers today, but I live on an island that has, if I drive 5 miles, it's probably sunny.
Oh, man, well, it's like 1,000,000 degrees and disgusting humidity. Like, I don't even want to go outside today because, we got the beaches. I'm about an hour from the beach, but it's just, the summer up in the Northeast in Jersey is disgusting. But so I'm a little jealous of probably a nice cool morning out there. So let's get right into it.
Okay.
Let's go back to the beginning. What got you into the fire department, in the fire service, fire EMT service, and then what happened?
Well, I got into it because I was a safety manager. That was the name they stuck on me because they said, "Will you be willing to, do our little bumper coffee talks and talk about safety stuff that we need to as a company?" This is with a construction company back in Minnesota. And so I said, yeah. And part of that included getting certified to do CPR. And one of the guys from the fire department was teaching it. and he essentially said to us, you know, you're going to forget all this, which is why we teach ABC, which is airway, breathing, and your heart rate. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I can remember ABC, I guess. And sure enough, a couple weeks later, I was at a local college swimming with my son was on the swim team, and one of his buddies was there, and his buddy was asthmatic. And so, of course, I was just, you know, I had some of my scuba gear on, and I was just back and forth doing laps. And then I, you know, noticed my son had his head in the water, and I looked down, and his buddy was at the bottom of the pool. And so we went down there, got him up, got him out, and, you know, he was unconscious. We managed to drag him up on the side of the pool. I told the kid, the lifeguard, go call 911. And so I did exactly what this firefighter said I would do. I froze. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh yeah, ABC, airway, breathing. And so, you know, I figured, well, I don't think there's anything in his throat. So I look, you know, I didn't see anything other than his tongue. I said, okay, he needs to be, you know, feel for a pulse. And oh my God, there's just a little bit one there. So, okay, give him 2 rescue breaths, see what the hell happens. So I did. And, you know, just like in the movies, he, and all of a sudden starts coughing up all kinds of water. And I was, you know, rolled him over on his side so he's not spitting on me. And, you know, fire department by then shows up and he gets revived and his mom and takes off with him in the ambulance, and the firefighter who taught the class happened to be there. And he says to me, he says, you know, you ought to consider joining the fire department because you obviously know how to do this. And I was, well, okay, what the heck? So that became my entry into the fire department. And then that department was, you had to do everything. There was no rescue division. You did fire, EMT, rescue, the whole shot. So that meant you went to, and primarily, I mean, if you're just doing firefighting, especially in this district, you're bored. Oh boy. Because most of the calls around here are medical, and it was the same way there. You know, you had your car accidents, you had things, but yeah, we did have rural barn fires we went to, but still, it was mostly medical stuff. So, and I just that was part of when I moved out here from Minnesota, one of my first steps was to get enrolled in the fire district here and see what it took to transfer my learning over my certification as an EMT and firefighter into Washington State. And that I had to redo my EMT, but that was okay. And that started, well, that lasted for about 16 years.
Okay. So, but you were a volunteer. You weren't a career firefighter or anything like that.
Nope.
Okay. So you did that for
7.
So you did it for 16 years. You saw a lot of stuff, obviously. Yep. But obviously, what happened?
Christmas Day 2011 is on our website. I have my blog post called "My Perfect Storm Call," and that's, you know, and I had no idea at the time where my nervous system was. All I know is Christmas Day, the kids were over, my pager goes off, and, you know, the dispatcher just tells you what information they're given. What do they know? I mean, they're talking on a phone just like you and I are. They don't even have the benefit of the picture. You know, 9-year-old girl injured by a car branch falling on the car, and I just thought, well, that sounds a little weird. Okay, somebody slapped on their brakes. She hit the seat, did something, whatever. So, you know, of course, that activates my nervous system, and off I go. And as I'm going, I get these updates that, you know, extrications required. And I was like, oh, well, that's a little bit more serious. That's not a car branch or a tree branch. And then, you know, 30 seconds later, they're doing CPR, and I'm like, boy, this call's just getting worse.
Right.
So, and like everything else, you don't get any identifying factors or anything. And, you know, we live on a small island. So I get down to this call, come wheeling around the corner, and it's kind of an S-turn there. And I recognized the vehicle. So I knew immediately who the young girl was. The ambulance she was in was still sitting there, which tells me that she should have been air flighted, but the reason they won't is because in our area, they have a protocol. If you don't have a patent heartbeat, you know, the helicopter won't even take off.
Yeah, it's pretty common, I think, throughout the country. Yeah,
it'd be my guess. And so I was like, oh my goodness. So I could see the mom. So I went over to work with her, and she became my patient. Of course, her concern was her daughter. I know that there's a problem here because she's still sitting here, but I can't tell mom that. So I'm still trying to keep mom focused. I'm very aware, and it was weird in terms of, I mean, when I first got out of the rig, I froze. And I had this little voice in the back of my head saying, because, I recognized what was going on. I knew who this family was. And I was like, you need to move. You need to move. You need to move in the back of my head. And I was frozen. So finally I came out of that, and, I go running over there and start helping the mom. And so, I worked with her, got her bundled up. The husband's neck was broken. He's a friend of mine. So both of them were concerned about their daughter. We get them loaded up in an ambulance. And so then I went over to the ambulance with the daughter in it and stuck my head in and realized, she's gone. So I was just like, oh my goodness. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. The chief's big rig was sitting there. So I just couldn't, I finally realized it's not that I couldn't hold it in. I didn't give a damn about holding it in anymore.
Okay. Wow.
So I just put my head down in the chief's car. One of the other EMTs was right next to me. I just started bawling. And the chief was still standing there right off of the bumper. And he says, oh, looks like we're going to need a CISD. So, I heard it, but it didn't mean much to me. And so, but after that, I spent weeks just coming apart everywhere, anywhere. My marriage was already coming apart at that point in time. And so finally, the woman who started Whidbey CareNet saw me in the coffee shop. We'd met before, but I could tell I was going to start crying again. And so I went into the back room, and she finally comes walking in and said, who takes care of you guys? What do you have for resources for this kind of thing? And I said, essentially, you're looking at it. And she thought to herself, that is wrong. So she put together Whidbey CareNet, and then later, I'm going to say half a year later, maybe or so, she asked me to come. I was the uniform, but it was designed to create free health care for emergency responders, primarily volunteers, because, we don't have, employee assistance programs. We don't have human resource departments. And we're not a bad, it's not a small district. And so there are a lot of rural districts smaller than us that have less of a budget, that have even less than what we would have. So she put together that, and she got a bunch of healthcare providers of all different kinds to provide free healthcare for emergency responders. And the fire chief here said it should start at where the dispatcher is, because they're the first ones to get the call. So that service is available to them, but they don't take advantage of it, primarily because most of them belong to an organization or a union that provides those benefits.
Okay.
So I get that. And then in the process, we started to see that there's a lot more people going through stuff that could that could use some knowledge and some understanding. And I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, mostly our aha moments and things, but
okay. That's okay.
We got to that place of realizing that, wow, this is bigger than just emergency responders in Whidbey Island. And so we created a business, and that's Raise Your Resilience, and started putting together a program to teach people how to deal with stress in the moment, and then be able to take some of that stuff that's accumulated and get that out of our bodies. So that's just kind of a nutshell where that went. But that was all predicated on Christmas Day 2011, which was 6 weeks after a car accident in our area that killed 3 kids who were 19 to 21, I think. And the gal who was driving the car lived, and I do believe she gets out of jail this year or next.
Wow.
Yeah. So galvanized our community.
Wow. So, I think I was at a conversation last night with somebody who we're creating an event for the National Overdose Awareness Day, which I believe is August 31st. And we were at a planning meeting last night and talking about, I was talking to this woman who lost her child from a drug overdose about 2 years ago almost. And I said, as tragic as it was, and I'm not trying to take away any of your emotion or your story at all, but the fact that you're taking something that was tragic and turning it into something that could help others means that death, that tragedy wasn't in vain. And from what I'm hearing, what you're talking about, the situation that broke the camel's back, like you said, for yourself, created a ripple effect, like dropping a pebble in a pond that can touch. Here you and I are. We've never met before. We're talking 2,000 miles away, but and now this conversation is going to go to the masses around the world from that singular event.
Oh yeah, and it's the one of the other EMTs at that call is now at Bastyr University working on her master's degree in counseling, and she asked me to come be her because I taught her how to this program that we've developed through Raise Your Resilience. She's taken that, and so she asked me how to some synchronous event down in Seattle I ended up being at, and she was there, and so we got to talking, and she says, "Hey, I got this class in counseling. Can you come be my final project, my senior?" And I was like, "Sure." So I came and talked to that class, and now that's turning into a workshop with the one class. The professor was there. She got excited. She's got me coming down to teach now a second class. So it's really starting to expand in all kinds of ways, like you're saying, from this one singular event. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And, I think that's, I think it's just fascinating how, we can, there's usually two options when you go through stuff that's traumatic and tragic. You could either crawl in a hole and hide, or you can get up and do something about it. And obviously you have decided to do something about it. And, I want to kind of step back a little bit and ask you, you've worked in the fire service, you've worked with emergency responders as a volunteer, and now on a different level as well, working with them to help them with their issues. What do you think is the hindrance or the wall, so to speak, about what keeps first responders from speaking, from reaching out, from communicating their struggles with life? Do you think there's one thing? Do you think there's a combination? What do you think?
I think there's a couple of things. One is, we have a culture where and it might be not just our inter-organizational culture, it might be somewhat national in our society as a whole, but we tend to be seen as and addressed as heroes. And there's this concept that hero doesn't have a weakness. And it's mythology years and years and years, every hero's got a weakness somewhere. That's part of the point, is there's a path and a journey they go through to achieve a goal. And there's challenges along the way. So there's that issue. And then I think there's a little bit of a stigma that around mental illness to begin with.
Sure.
And mental health is just part of what we are as an organism. And thinking that illness is any different than a cold or a flu or a broken arm is part of the problem. There is no difference. I think what the difference is that colds and flus we know come and go. But things like bipolar disease or PTSD or anxiety or depression, they tend to have more of a permanent note. I think they tend to carry more of a broken note than any other kind of illness. And that's why we then want to not make any noise about it. And I know I've got some colleagues up in Canada who've been fired for having PTSD. And I know that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I know police officers are real reluctant to talk about it because they'll go through the same thing. If they, and the difference being is that, of course, you and I have Halligan bars, and, but I don't think anybody's concerned about us going off on anybody. And I don't know any of us who have committed suicide with a Halligan bar. Cops have a gun. Sure. And they get excited, they get out in the field and they can shoot somebody who's on, and we're seeing a lot of this over the last couple of years. And part of me says that I think the issue may be bigger than just racism. You get people who are under flight, of course they're going to feel threatened, but then they pull a gun, and by that time the cortex is offline, so it's just an instinct reaction to protect yourself. Leaving all of the stuff out of that could go into that conversation, we end up shooting people. Well, okay, that stands to reason. And I'm saying, if they start looking at PTSD as the reason, they're going to start saying, oh, well, we just need to take the guns from them. Then all of a sudden a cop's not a cop anymore.
Right. Well, there you got, obviously. And that would be, anarchy as it is, that would just be anarchy. But I guess, and hearing everything you're saying, like, I agree with you. And this kind of segues into what your program is doing with your company, with Raise Your Resilience. Is, do you think, how do you put it? Like, I'm going to draw a parallel here.
Okay.
When somebody has PTSD or depression, or develops a substance abuse disorder or whatever, do you think that that's the problem, or do you think that that you have to trace it back to address it?
I think it's a symptom. I also don't necessarily think that you have to know exactly what the problem is.
Okay.
I could say there's some science behind that. I kind of take Dr. Mate's approach that, let's say, with substance abuse, that his approach is, when you're dealing with addiction, the question is, why the pain? Mm. And if you're talking, though, about child development pain, there may not be any words around that, because you and I didn't form words until we were maybe a year, 2 years old. That meant that for 2 years, we were going through things that we did not have the capability of putting into words. So if you're in a household that's taking drugs, that's high stress, that's all of this kind of thing, my nervous system gets dysregulated immediately. I don't have my attachment needs met. I don't feel safe. My nervous system gets dysregulated. I have absolutely no words for that. All I have are emotions. Imagine what those are.
That's a very interesting point.
I grow up, I go through all this kind of crap, this behavior that I adapt, that's all survival based, and I don't need, and that's the problem. I'll say problem with some talk therapies. They're trying to address with words something that words never got formed for. So the guy who created the modality we teach realized this. He's a PhD in social work, so he's no dummy. He knows all this stuff. He's done counseling all his life. He's aware of not only that, but his question was, wait a minute. Talk therapy is only a couple hundred years old. So a lot of this stuff is a neurological experience. Isn't there a neurological off switch? Isn't there some way that the body might have had when we were, because if we've had the same nervous system for the last 400,000 years, okay, so what happens if somebody got attacked by a saber-toothed tiger? They go through the same fight or flight, but, they didn't have talk therapy. What did they do? What did their neurology do? And so he began to see that. And, of course, any mammal, we can see it in mammals, and some of that's on our website. But that's the point, is that he came to a place of realizing that there is an off switch. So I don't need to talk about my stuff, because who likes to? But if there is no words for it, maybe we can start that healing process through the body. And then maybe, and this has been my experience, then I began to have the words around those experiences. And I'm skipping a lot of stuff here, but even for those things that don't, the body has a way to heal that. And even for those events that did occur, that I do have memory around, it begins to process those and put those back into my life experience, my life timeline, as I like to say, where they belong. But I've released, and that's a loose term, but I've released some of this stuff through my body and taken the emotional pop out of them, so that I can process those things. I can integrate those experiences because they don't scare the shit out of me to talk about them anymore.
Wow,
Kind of
that's a really interesting angle on it. That, I mean, even me, like, I'm always learning, and I've never really heard it described that way. But about, like, the actual, just the how the body react, how the body handles these things, whether and like given the example about thousands of years ago when the cavemen and all that, like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, our humanity has been the same since that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Generally speaking, we're not going to get into. I definitely don't want to get into evolutionary conversation about it, but things. Now, so now we're at a point today where we have a million bits of technology. We have all these science. We have all this research. We have tons of things that have gone into how to handle it. And do you find? I mean, obviously, you might be a little biased. I don't know, but you find that there's not just one way to approach these things.
Well, yeah, that's true. There's a lot. I mean, we don't. I mean, I'm somewhat limited because I'm not a therapist. I came to this as a firefighter, for crying out loud.
Right.
But I had immense experience with this body-based tool that I use. But But I still have a story. I still have a narrative. And even if I'm, the founder of this particular set of exercises that would teach people to use this tool, which is innate in my body anyway. He developed it for people because he lived in the Middle East for a long time. He was in Lebanon in the 80s, and then he was in the Sudan, and war was everywhere. And, so in the Sudan, he's dealing with people who didn't even have concepts for psychotherapy. So it wasn't like they could, even if there was one available, it wasn't like you could say, hey, just go ahead and walk the 100 miles to tell your story. They had their own particular methods for storytelling, and that usually involves sitting around a fire. In Lebanon, of course, the place became a hole, and you couldn't say to somebody, oh, well, you just go down and talk to your shrink about it, because the shrink had either left the country or that was the guy he was talking to. Right, and that's what they have in Syria right now. You have people who've been traumatized, but there is no medical help for that because they all left the country. So his point wasn't necessarily that these other things aren't useful in their place. Part of my mind says it's cart before the horse. Mm-hmm. But the other part of me says that, I still have a story. I want to tell that story. And if going to see a shrink helps you tell that story and integrate that story more, cool. No more power to you. I mean, Dr. Berselli is still a working PhD. He teaches it at Arizona State University. So, it's not like he's against counseling. He still uses it, but he's realized that primarily a traumatized being, it's in their neurology. It came back to their psychology. It didn't start there or stay there. So, and in the moment, you and I are on a call, we get to a car accident, it's a bad one, and we can hear people who are moaning or groaning or screaming. I mean, our nervous systems are already in high gear. Now what can we do in the moment? I can't tell the chief, oh, wait a minute, I got to go talk to my therapist about this because this is scaring the crap out of me. I can't sit down and tremor. I can't sit down and meditate. There have got to be tools that I can use right in that moment. And so we look at a broad variety of things. I can breathe in that moment. I can even use a particular breathing technique that will actually downregulate my nervous system just a little bit to make me more present. So it's not like we're not keen on saying, this is the only path. There are other tools that people, and because you and I are both different. for me, physical activity is an important part of my my health and well-being. But it took me a while before I could actually come to that place of doing it properly without hurting myself. And that's been a complete learning experience. So there are all kinds of things we can do to be healthy. But I do believe that, and this is somewhat of a difference. And this, I picked this quote up from my my trainer. She says, we're not supposed to spend our time healing. That's not what we're hardwired for, and that's not what life is about. We're supposed to heal so we can live our lives.
Wow, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a nice spin on it.
Yep.
Because, you hear people, and I know you've heard it too. People say, well, I have to heal. I have to take my time to heal.
Yep.
But you're not living in that because it's like you're stuck in that mode.
Yep. And part of my argument, we could say this is about healthcare in general, is that it's not about disease. It's become disease management.
Yes.
And one of the things I was down in a conference in Georgia a couple of years ago, and the guy who organized it was a firefighter, and he was a former Marine and all that kind of stuff. And the gal who presented at one of the earlier classes was talking about PTSD, and she said it's not curable, and I disagree with that. And so at the end, they asked me to do an extra class with all of the event organizers and then all of the teachers of the different classes, because apparently word had got around. And so I said, okay, well, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. So as way of illustration, what I did is they were all sitting in a circle, and I took my elbow and I put it right on this guy's trapezius, and then I just leaned into him. And I figured, I know this guy's, that's good. I don't care how tough a Marine you are, that's not going to be comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started counting my breaths before I said anything because I wanted it to be uncomfortable. And I said, okay, here's what it is. I said, I am Dave's problem, correct? Everybody could see that. Everybody could see I'm leaning on his trapezius. And I said, now, let me ask you a question. If I'm on your shoulder, if I am your problem, do you want to manage me or do you want me to go away? And I said, and if there's an option for this to go away, are you going to pursue that option? And that's when he turned his head and said, yes, I want you to go away. And I said, cool. Because I said, that's where thinking that, and this plays into what my trainer said, we can heal so we can live our lives because our neurology is capable of doing that. Now, if you're that child who was living in a neglectful home, an alcoholic home where people went to jail or you got hit, you have developmental issues. You have behaviors that then got developed around those issues, and that creates the need to repattern some of that. For example, in my last marriage, my ex and I were, in the last couple of years, just didn't talk to each other civilly. That became the hardwired neural network. We were always on the defensive with each other, so we didn't talk to each other. And then I got out of that, and I'd date somebody, and we'd have a disagreement, and I'd start raising my voice, and finally one of them said, A, you don't have to talk to me that way, and B, I'm not going to let you talk to me that way. And I start to get defensive about it. And I just before the first word rolled out of my mouth, I really, oh, I don't have to talk to her that way? Huh. Really?
So simple, maybe not easy, but simple.
But that's where the repatterning occurs. That's where I need to change my behavior. And that's where sometimes having a second set of ears, second set of eyes, oh man. And when I retired from the fire district, I thought, you know what? I wonder if I might have some identity issues around being a firefighter. So I went and had a couple sessions with a counselor and just said, got any, anything I should be looking out for? I just want to make sure that I don't get tripped up by, because, I'm sorry, you're just done. You turn all your gear in and you don't get the pages. You don't get the text messages. You don't go to the fire station. You've been doing this for 16 years, 24/7. Wow, that's a change. And it just all of a sudden. So there is a place for using those tools and having those other resources. And part of oh man. Anyway, yeah, I'm all about using other tools because we as humans have other tools innate within us. Our own, I mean, and anyway, I could go on and on.
Sure. Well, I mean, everything you're saying really is I like what I'm getting out of everything you're saying is when your resources are limited, because I want to draw a parallel with the state of the health healthcare in this country, especially in the United States, because I can't speak about other countries because I'm not there, but I can speak about where I live. And with the challenges of rising healthcare costs, the difficulties in getting into good quality mental health treatment, substance abuse treatment, all these things. What do you do? Like I was talking to somebody last night about what if you can't get somebody into a treatment center because they don't have insurance or finances or whatever? What do you do with that person? Do you just let them go kill themselves? No, you don't. You've got to have an option and to be able to address or to start to deal with these things within yourself with limited external resources.
Exactly. I was just talking to I'm going to go up and speak to not EMT, the paramedic union up in on one of the mainland counties. Anyway, the synchronicity, as we were talking about earlier. And anyway, as we got to talking, I said, the core thing here, the important thing to know is if we go ahead with this and you guys hire us to come teach you, it will be in some sense a short-term relationship, in some sense it'll be long-term, because what we're giving you is a tool, and that tool is for you to have. Because I'm talking about something that's in your body. All I'm going to show you how to do is access it.
How to access it, sure.
We use the term self-induce and self-regulate. Once you've accessed it and you learn how to play with this thing, I mean, so in that regard, we become like coaches. Once you've learned how this thing works, you don't need me. You might have other resources in your own body. And sometimes, that's the thing, is resourcing within your own body, grounding, breathing, all those kind of things that we can use in stressful moments. But you might have other resources, you may not. And for those, but this tool is designed for those, it's designed to be a self-empowering tool, which is why we like it.
So, okay. I love it. I love it. I think it's amazing. So we've got a few more minutes left to wrap up. So I want you to tell me, how somebody can access your program, what it entails exactly. Like, is it somewhere they go, you go to them, how they access it? You don't necessarily have to get into, cost involved, because I'm sure that's something they could address as they reach out to you. But basically, like if you were giving me an elevator conversation, a 2-minute elevator conversation as to who you are, what you do, and how people can get access to you and what you're going to do, what would you say?
Well, go to our website, raiseyourresilience.com. It's pretty simple. There's a lot of videos on there. There's information on there that people can access, and there's contact information. And a lot of it starts with just getting questions answered sometimes. And that's your best bet, to go there. And because, what I do, I can teach you on Zoom how to do what we do. That's the beauty of it. It's that simple. Some of the other stuff, and of course, we're retooling our program even as we speak. So that's where it all starts. I may or may not. There's this, and I'm not. I don't say this. I prefer. If I had a preference, I would say I would love to teach people in person more than I would on Zoom or via any kind of video tool. That being said, if somebody feels the same way, I will try to find a provider that's closer to them and then help them out that way. But starting at the website, getting a little understanding of what it is we're talking about, I think is the most important part. And then from there, I help people if it can't work out, or the advantage of having a female business partner is that, and this happened with our very, very first client. And this was several years ago now. Having a phone conversation, she says, I hear you're really good. And I'm thinking, how the hell did you hear that? You're my first client. Whoa, cool. And anyway, in the middle of the conversation, I suddenly realized, oh, wait a minute. Something about this just sounds a hair cautious. So I said, would you feel more comfortable talking to a woman? And she said, yes, I would. And I said, well, my partner's sitting 15 feet away. I'll give you her phone number. And she was inside, I was outside. So I thought it was kind of interesting. So we have that capability of working even that way. So, and that's one thing I'm very, very careful about, because women have other traumas that I can't speak to very well. So yeah, go to the website, raiseyourresilience.com. If you have questions, just to start learning what it is we're about, what we're doing. And then if you have more questions or you want to talk, get a hold of us. Okay. It's the easiest way to do that.
So now you said, I'm going to kind of end with this and asking you left the fire service. Was that right after that call, or?
Nope.
So you stayed in.
Years, and my learning how to tremor is the tool that's actually inside all of us, made me a better responder for a couple of years.
So you were able to, and this is an important point and message I want our audience to hear, is that you didn't have to walk away. You were able to continue working in that field for a while, because you were able to recognize that you needed help. You were able to access help, and you were able to integrate that into your life. So you were able to have a fulfilling, you didn't have to just walk away.
Exactly. That's really, really well said. I did. And that's one of the things I want, is because people really love this work, and this is good work. And if you want to stay, I just want to give you a tool, just like any other tool that we use, like the Halligan bars, the trauma shears, the gloves, how BSI, seen safe.
Yeah, right.
We got all the little tools and things in our belts and in our pockets. And, this is just another one, but it's about the individual, so they can continue to do their job. Because when they get out on the field, when they get to that car accident, they will see somebody shaking. And then after they determine that, okay, they didn't hit their head, they've got great level of consciousness, they are, so far as I can tell, in good health, then I can view their tremoring very differently. It is not a pathological thing. And that makes me better for that patient.
But I just connected the dots with something you said about the BSI. That's like the first thing we were all taught: scene safety, body substance isolation, blah blah blah. But when we talk about personal safety first. But this is one of the we wear turnout gear and gloves and masks and whatever. But yeah, this is the place to address the psychological, emotional, and mental safety that gets overlooked by all the lights and sirens, I think.
You bet. Because, you and I both know that, okay, well, here on our district, 80% of the calls are fire or medical calls. And 80% of those are going to be, I need to hold your hand, because, and most, in our neighborhood, it's geriatric stuff. So it's, you get the call, I don't feel good. Well, you get there and, okay, she doesn't feel good, can't say why. And then, you get some actual people have some, she fell, she broke her wrist, her hip's out of place. You get those. But then there's those 5% of calls when you show up and they just are shit. My Tai Chi teacher committed suicide. This kid blew his brains out. Those are the ones that you show up and it's like a punch. And that's where having those personal resources are so important. We need to have the ability, because they affect our neurology, and we want to downwind those. But, as a group of people, if everybody in the fire station or in the medical hall were on the same page and said, oh, that call really sucked, man, I need to do something about this. Well, we can talk amongst ourselves. If we see we're shaking, we can just let it happen while we're talking and are sitting in our chair. Or while we're on the scene, you might just poke your buddy and say, take a breath here, one of those inhale, shorter inhale, longer exhale, just to downregulate a little bit. This is going to be ugly. Those are the kind of tools that we can have. And if we have them, that makes our careers last longer if we like the work that we're doing. And that makes us better for the people we show up for. So.
And I bet you, I would imagine that it translates into those family relationships and relationships with our friends and our children and other aspects of our lives. Because, you said it earlier about, your divorces and your relationship failures. Well, what's a pretty big common thread amongst first responders? Relationship failure and divorce.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Why? Because we get married to the job, we get married to rescuing all the strangers that we don't know, but we don't take care of our home front.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing. And then if our nervous system gets all jangled up with stress and trauma and everybody else's stuff, and we don't have a way to get it out of our own system, well, that begins to affect our ability to. All I did is I just wanted to withdraw because everything else became like static because I was married to that work. Yeah. So, it's amazing how it all works together. And that was a great insight because that's very true.
Well, I'll tell you, Leckey, it has been so great talking to you and getting to learn about you and about what you've done with, and I don't even want to say it like this, but, I'll use the cliche about the lemons that you were given. You made some great lemonade out of it.
Yeah, thanks.
And that's awesome. The last minute here, what's if I could ask you one message you want to give to our audience out there, what is it? And then you could just you could talk. You could also just give your website and your contact info once more so everybody can hear.
Okay. The last thing I would say, if you ever spontaneously start to tremor, just like the dog does on the 4th of July or during loud noises or during a storm, if you find yourself doing that and you can rule out any other health issues via our protocols, let it happen. That's what we're talking about. Let it happen. You get in a car accident, you hit a deer, you start to shake. Let that happen. So if you need to talk about it, you can contact me at raiseyourresilience.com. Be more than happy to talk to anybody.
Awesome. And it's been, again, a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. Everybody, this has been Leckey Harrison calling us from the great Pacific Northwest of Washington, and I hope you guys reach out to him because he's helped me a lot this morning, and I can only imagine the impact he's going to continue to have with his program and the effect that it's going to have. I'm amazed. Thanks again, man. We really appreciate it.
You are so welcome, sir.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I really hope it'll help you or your loved one. If you get a chance, I really would appreciate it if you could head over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a review. It will really help me out in many ways. Take care everyone, and remember, you are not alone in your struggle.
I want to give a big shout out to one of our supporters, the Addictions Academy. The Addictions Academy is the world's foremost accredited trainer of addiction coaches, addiction counselors, interventionists, and international master addiction coaches, offering on-site training at your rehab or facility, live virtual classroom webinars, or on-demand classes covering an extensive availability of courses and certifications. Check them out at theaddictionsacademy.com or call Dr. Callie Estes and her team at 1-800-706-0318.
Thanks for listening to Rescue the Rescuer. For show notes and more, head on over to rescuetherescuer.com.
We are a part of the mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. This show is produced by James Healy of RecoveryInnovators.com. If you have a message and want to start a show of your own, contact him and let him know that we sent you.